All right. So if you made it this far, you are at the Break the Norm Leadership April Lunch and Learn on Training That Sticks. My name is Ramian Pierre. I'm the Chief Learning Officer at Break the Norm Leadership. I'm super excited about this topic. It is one of my favorites to discuss. I'm going to give you the bottom line up front, literally like in 3 minutes or less, the whole point of this training, and then we'll do the rest later. So I'll give you the bottom line up front. I'll do some opening announcements. Then we're going to hear from our sponsor for today, Savannah's chapter of PMI. Thank you, Savannah PMI, for sponsoring today's session and making it a full hour. So we'll hear from them. And then I'll get into the details of what I'm going to share in the first 3 minutes in terms of the answer to the question. Does that work for folks? People who have their cameras on, which is one person. Lee, does that work for you? All right. I will also say that I Break the Norm Leadership in general, and me in particular, we are a pro cameras on, pro drop things in the chat type of team. So feel free, to the degree that you're comfortable and able, to show up so that I can engage with you directly. All right. That said, let me tell you the bottom line about how to design training that sticks. I've been an educator for about 30 years. I started out as a middle school history teacher. I've worked in schools, basically 7 through 12, as well as college and graduate students, working with college and graduate students. I've worked with leaders in the nonprofit sector. I've worked with government leaders. I've worked with folks in corporate settings. And I find 3 big mistakes happen over and over and over again that keep training from sticking. And if we just, these are the only things that happen that stop training from sticking, from people from applying what they learned in training when they return back to their jobs. But if these 3 things were addressed, I'm convinced it would solve most people's problems. All right, so thing number 1, training is not being used in an appropriate way. It's being used for situations for which it is not designed and not well suited. So many people in organizations recognize that there are performance issues, and they often throw training at it as a way of solving it. But it is often not the best, probably sometimes even the worst way of dealing with the performance issue. So I'll go through what are the other types of performance issues and what might be better ways of addressing those than training. So number 1, stop using training as the silver bullet to solve all of your team or organizational performance improvement problems. It can't work. Number 2, training is not supported once the training event is over. There's sort of the assumption that you train people and you're done. You can walk away and they will do all the things that you told them to in exactly the way that you told them. And anyone who's worked with humans knows that that is not the case. That if it's not monitored, supported, and reinforced after the training event ends, you're really wasting everyone's time and energy at the actual training event. So number 1 is training is used inappropriately, like a silver bullet to solve all problems. Number 2 is training is not supported once the event is over. And the last thing that I see time and time again is training is just poorly designed, like not well structured, not well facilitated. Not everyone has access to a professional learning officer or a professional instructional designer. I'm going to give you some tips, even if you don't have access to those type of people, what you can do to create training that is pretty good. Using a structure that I found works over and over and over again in a number of different settings with a number of different populations. I didn't invent it, but long story short, it's Gagne's 9 events of instruction. I'll go through that later. So the 3 reasons why training doesn't stick, and what we'll talk about later today, is because it's used inappropriately to solve problems it wasn't designed to solve. Number 2, because training isn't supported after the event is over. So even if it's good, people don't apply it when they're back on the job. Or number 3, the actual design or implementation is poor. The training is not well put together for adult learners. All right, so that's for those of you who came on time, that's the headline up front. If you need to drop off, I completely understand. Let me do a couple of announcements before we hear from our sponsor today, Savannah PMI. Couple of announcements. So first announcement is today's session is sponsored by the Savannah chapter of PMI. There's someone with an open mic. Thanks, Rachel, you are on it. I love PMI. I love Savannah. That's where my people are from. So I'm so glad that they're here joining us today. The benefit for you all is that when sessions are sponsored, instead of them being half an hour of terse brilliance. They're a full 60 minutes of amazing content. So thank you, Savannah PMI, for giving us the whole hour to talk about this important topic. If your organization is interested in sponsoring any of the upcoming Lunch and Learns for Break the Norm Leadership, please contact Rachel, the other person on this call with the Break the Norm Leadership as the name. Contact Rachel at breakthenormleadership.com. I'm sure she'll drop her email address as well as the link to all the future Lunch and Learns into the chat so that that sounds really rude, so that all of you amazing, attractive, intelligent, wise folks can take a look at what our calendar of upcoming Lunch and Learns are. All right, that's announcement number 2. Announcement number 3, if you like what you hear today, then please, please, please introduce us to your bosses or your procurement specialists. We love helping people. We love working with organizations in a variety of different ways. So again, reach out to Rachel at breakthenormleadership.com, and we can do something bespoke and custom just for you and your organization. And then last announcement before we hear from our amazing folks at Savannah PMI. If you like what you hear today, please leave a Google review. Let's see if I can do this. I'm going to copy the link for a Google review and drop it into the chat. I pray this works. I'm going to do it twice. You leaving a review. Oh, thank you, Rachel. You leaving a review helps me convince Rachel that I'm not a lunatic, just talking random crap once a month on these Lunch and Learns, and that I'm actually a trained professional who people respect and like. So please help me keep my job. All right, that said, I want to welcome off mic on camera Lee. Lee, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to hear more about Savannah PMI. What can you tell me and all the other folks who are gathered here?
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning to some folks, depending on where you are. PMI Savannah, we're really excited to host this month's Lunch and Learn. Right, we're a 25-year-old chapter of the Project Management Institute. We have about 250 members. We're focused on furthering PMI's mission of project management excellence, and we do that through a combination of education, networking, and then formal certification through PMI, of course. Our membership reflects coastal Georgia's diversity of a mixture of advanced manufacturing, aerospace manufacturing, port-related operations, government, military, tourism, healthcare, all the great things that go on in our area. Our members, we have representatives from each of those industries. I think, Break the Norm leadership sessions are always a treasure trove of info that we can bring back to our professional and personal lives. A lot of what we hear, we think of it in a professional manner, but sometimes it's applicable to our personal lives as well. So I'm excited. I think today's topic, training that sticks, incredibly important topic, regardless of industry. And I think most leaders at any level of an organization or organizations themselves really do struggle with this topic of making it effective and sort of having those proof points. I know for myself, I work in the healthcare industry and quite often getting support, whether it's budget, time, right, of training, sort of like how do you prove it was effective is also always one of those things so that when you go back to the well again later, right, you can say, hey, look what we did accomplish last time. So really excited for the topic. Hopefully folks pre-read some of the newsletter from April, right, so they have an idea of what the topic is today. But again, excited to host today's event and really excited both for the chapter members as well as myself professionally and personally to hear what we're going to talk about. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lee. And how long have you been a member of the Savannah chapter?
For a few decades myself, right? I've served on the board of directors for in different capacities for a little over a decade on and off. Currently the president of the chapter. But been involved, like I said, I think I might have had a full head of hair when I started with the chapter, which I certainly don't know.
Hair is overrated, so you're cool. All right, 2 more questions. One, if people who are listening want to, either live or on the recording, want to get in contact with the Savannah PMI, how do they do that? And then last question is there anything you all are working on or upcoming projects that you're excited about and want to share with folks who are listening?
Yeah, thank you. Folks who are interested in the chapter or some of the other events that we put on, both locally networking events or some of the education, can go to pmisavannah.org. And we have an events page there. And really, what we're working on is mostly engaging with our local community, both project manager and then extending. We're very focused on the military segment because we have quite a bit of that. And quite often, there's folks in the military transitioning out into civilian careers. We're also working very focused to engage with students in all the different universities locally because plugging them in, we can give them a lot of support. PMI as an organization has a focus on those two populations as well, military and students. And it's just great to be mentors to folks as they're coming up through. You get out of college and where do I start my career? So we can kind of help plug folks in on whether it's just looking at resumes, looking at certifications, whatever it is, we really focus on the students as well.
Awesome. Well, Lee, thank you for telling us more about Savannah PMI, and please thank all of the folks back on the home front for sponsoring today's session. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, mic off, Lee. Thank you. So here we go. We're gonna dive back into the content. So for those of you who were here right at the top of the hour, I quickly went over the 3 big principles of how to make training that sticks. I will now re-go over that and provide tremendous more detail. If you have access to the Break the Norm Leadership Lunch and Learn site, I'll drop that link in the chat again. Go there to download the handout that goes with this session, the April handout. There'll be, anyway, because I'll be talking through that a little bit later, but much of the content that I speak to today relates directly to something that's in that handout. All right. That said, let's get back into it. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right, here we go. So training is not designed to solve all of your organization's performance improvement problems. We throw training at a lot of things it's not well suited for. And those include some of the key core issues that are on this slide right here. Sometimes performance is reduced because your team is stressed or burned out. Sometimes they're not performing at the level you want or consistently because there are conflicts, interpersonal conflicts among team members, or perhaps between departments that are involved with a particular initiative. Also, there could be poor communication or communication loops that are opened but never closed so that the speaker and the listener are both literally on the same page. Something that I've seen time and time again is resource availability. Sometimes people don't do what they're trained to do because they don't literally have the resources to do that, whether the resources are time bandwidth or whether the resources are equipment or support in some way. Policy knowledge, like sometimes groups don't perform consistently because they have different interpretations of what is the policy or the procedure. Literally, the version of what is supposed to happen in my head might differ from the vision that Rachel has in her head. And when you have those mixed matched visions of what is supposed to happen, then things happen inconsistently or poorly, or worse, we work at sort of an opposition of each other, perhaps even unknowingly. I'm doing A, B, and C, while Rachel's doing X, Y, and Z that cancel each other out in some way. So policy knowledge can be a reason why performance is not improving. Job fit and satisfaction. Some people do not do their jobs because they don't like them, or they don't think it's a good fit for them, or they're just like unsatisfying. Or if you're a fan of Herzberg's two-factor theory, all the things that like irritate them about their job are so great that even the things they like about their job can't compensate. So they're sort of caught in a situation where I like my job, but all the crap I have to do just makes it impossible for me to really like being here and focus on doing good work. Job fit satisfaction. Or process efficiency. Sometimes performance is slow or inconsistent because the processes that are in place are just not well designed, not optimized for either the current situation or the current people or the current resources. All of these can be problems that I've seen that have impeded performance in organizations and teams. None of them require training. Training is designed for when people don't know how to do something or don't have the skill to do something. You're addressing a knowledge or skill gap, not a motivation gap, not a clarity gap, not a communication gap, not an interpersonal or emotional intelligence gap. Like those situations can be addressed with other things. And if you check out the April Lunch and Learn handout, you'll see some suggestions we have for each one of those other 6 different types of performance issues, suggestions on how you might better address those things. We share them not because you don't know better. I mean, as I said before, smart, attractive, wise people in this room, but the people who often tell you, create a training, or I need you to find a training, what they really want is a solution to their problem. And what I tell people, and was told myself when particularly when I was younger in my career and I just wanted to be right about everything, I said, if my boss asks me to do something and I think they need something different, I'm going to give my boss what they want, and I'm going to give them what I think they really need. Yeah, it's twice as much work, but that's the burden of being the amazingly smart person that I am. So tell yourself that, or tell your team members that if your supervisor says, go do a training, take a look at this list, take a look at the handout, see if this is really a training problem, and then tell them, here's a training that we can get that costs $20 million. Or that $20 million, that's not likely to give us a good return on that investment, not likely to address the core issue, and probably will make people feel like we're wasting their time. Or we could do these things instead, which get at the core issue, which is one of the 6 things on this chart. Does that make sense to folks? Oh, you know what? I can't hear you. Okay, Emily's clapping. I see all your claps, Emily. They mean the world to me. Thank you. And Lee asked a question. So let me say this. I'm going to address Lee's question, or it is a question, it's a question mark. I'm going to address Lee's question, and I'm going to actually ask folks, we will be doing a Q&A at the end, so feel free to throw questions in now as you think of them. You don't have to wait, because I can respond to them now or later. Just give me a second to read this question. Is there ever a value to providing training as a grounding, baselining activity to help understand if there's an underlying issue or problem? Ooh, well, that's a really intriguing question, Lee. I would say you could use training sort of as a pilot, or a test balloon, or sort of like a canary in the coal mine to figure out, like, what do people already know? It might be more effective or time efficient and resource efficient to do like maybe just an assessment. Like literally it could be like an online quiz or an assessment in terms of observing people, like literally walking around and saying, can people do X, Y, and Z? But some sort of audit, I think, is really helpful. In fact, if you have access to a professional, I've done it twice now. I'm going to stop interrupting my sentences. I'm going to finish a whole sentence. I just get excited. So any professional instructional designer is going to want to conduct some level of needs assessment to find out what is the problem, to figure out, is it really a training problem? And to what degree is it a problem? Like what type of training is needed? So if you have a professional you're working with who doesn't jump into the needs assessment first, but instead jumps right into designing, tell them to slow down and actually do some sort of audit about what skills are needed. And the suggestion I make, and I'm going to make it again later when we get to how to design good training, is focus on what you need people to do after the training, not on what you need them to know. Do first, like I need them to do A, B, and C, and then figure out what is the minimum effective dose of information they need to do those 3 things. There is a temptation of very smart people to want to tell people who want to learn things everything we know about the topic. They don't want to know everything. You don't want them to know everything. It will just, I'll speak for myself, it will confuse me. It will make me not know what's important. The big difference between, it's been a while since I looked at this research around experts, but the big difference between experts and novices isn't how much they know. Or actually take it back, it kind of is. It's not the case that experts know more than novices, and that's what drives the performance. Experts do know more than novices, but what they really know is they know which of the 10,000 things in this topic, they know which 10 are important, whereas novices don't know what's important, so they pay attention to all 10,000 things. So start with what people can do, not what you want them to know, because our tendency as human designers and instructors and leaders is to give people more information than they need, and it actually does more harm than good. All right, great question, Lee. You got it to me at the wrong time, but that's okay. Not your fault, my fault. All right, so training is only designed to deal with gaps in skill and knowledge, not if you're trying to deal with any of these other things that people might be experiencing in the workplace, that is reducing their level of performance or reducing their level to consistently perform. All right, so that's number one. Got through, hold on one second, just go back to my notes really quickly. Oh, yes, yes, got through that. All right, let me talk about the second reason that training doesn't stick. It doesn't stick when it's not reinforced and supported. So let me say this first. Training is a very expensive intervention to improve performance. It's expensive because you take people's time. There are 74 people on this call right now. And if I did a swag, I'm gonna do public math. I don't make anyone else do public math, but if I did a quick swag at how much it's costing us, if this were it is a training event. If this were a training event at my organization, I usually tell folks, all right, consider how much people's time costs, the average person's time costs when you add in all the benefits and stuff. I usually just tell people use like $100 an hour. So let's say we're gonna spend an hour together. There are 74 of us, so that's 7,400 just in terms of our time. Now double it, because not only am I paying for you to be in this training, for this hour, you're still going to have to do an hour's worth of work that you didn't do in this training. Like you would have been doing stuff at work, right? So I double that. So I'm going to double that and say that immediately it's $14,800 for this lunch and learn. That doesn't include the cost of the instructor or the materials or the company that bought the instructor. So you have to add those costs on top of it. And then you need to add the cost of transition time. So you all were doing something, if you're on the East Coast, you were doing something from 11 to 12. You were working hard at your job, making widgets. You were operating at a high level. Then instantaneously, you were in this Zoom meeting from 12 to 1. And at 1 o'clock, you will instantaneously turn back and go back to working on making widgets at the high level you were at when you started at 11 o'clock. That is not the way the world works. For two reasons. One, transitions are not instant. People literally the training ends up costing any transition time from work to the training and from training back to the work. The other way that you end up paying is in terms of the productivity of people. At 11 o'clock, let's say I was operating at 100%. After this training is over and I go back to working at 1 o'clock, I'm not at 100%. It's going to take me a while to actually ramp back up to 100%. All of this time, energy, productivity, it costs money. And that's part of what makes training so incredibly expensive an intervention. That said, and if you really want it to work, you still have to support it afterwards for a couple of reasons. The big one is people forget. If you want to Google something, Google forgetting curve theory. I'll drop it in the chat. Forgetting curve theory. And there's some debate. I see you, Emily. Thank you. There's a forgetting curve theory fan out there. There's some debate about what forgetting curves look like, but the general principle is accepted that I learned something at this moment, and in an hour, it's very likely I'm going to forget about half of it. And within a day, a week, a month, it's all gone unless there's some way that it is reinforced or supported afterwards. So that's reason number one. People will forget. The second is people will get distracted. When we go back to work, we have like the same pressures and distractions and priorities as we had when we left work to come to this training. So you have to find some way to help the training stick. It won't stick all by itself because our adults are smart. They know what they have to spend time and energy on. You're paying them to do their jobs. You're not actually paying them to learn what you teach them in training unless you're intentional about it. So let's go to this list. What you're seeing on this slide are a list of some potential options for how you might monitor training, just watching it, how you might support it, and how you might reinforce it. Now, I always forget the name of the early research around how to improve performance in the workplace involved observational studies. I think they were the Thompson observational studies. And what they found was literally just watching people improves in performance. Like when you put organizational attention on people, they tend to do better, particularly when they know they're being watched. So monitoring actually has a real impact. And you can use different ways of monitoring. You can use assessment tools like quizzes or polls to find out if people are remembering and applying what they learned in training. You can use direct observation, literally watching people during meetings, walking around. I know it's hard to do in the virtual age, but seeing them do the important thing that you want them to learn in training, seeing afterwards, can they do it? You'd be surprised how rare it is for direct observation of what was taught in the training to happen after the training. Then you want to find out what the performance metrics are. How do you measure if people are doing the thing you taught them during the training? And lastly, having the actual learners, the workers, provide you a portfolio 3 months, at least 2 months, let's say 3 months, 4 months after the training of here's how I took everything I learned in that training and have applied it in my work over the course of the last 3 months. Like, have them do that work instead of you doing it for them. All of these monitoring options, it's really helpful to think about these in advance or in conjunction of designing the training. Because as you're figuring out, I'm just going to pick on names because I see some names. If I want Jennifer to learn X, figure out a way, how could I observe Jennifer doing that? And observation, I'm surprised how poorly people often observe. Observation is literally, you use your 5 sentences. If I can see it, if I can hear it, then she's doing it. It's not usually appropriate to use the other senses in workplaces. Direct observation should not be tasting, touching, smelling people at work. But if I can't hear it and if I can't see it, then it's not happening. Like, create that level of criteria for your direct observation. Support. Coaching sessions. Now, I will say coaching is incredibly expensive, that one-on-one interaction time, and qualified coaches, for example, coaches that are certified by the International Coaching Federation, are excellent and not cheap, which is true with all professionals, right? So you may need to consider like informal coaching, like teaching your managers and people leaders how to coach. Or you may want to consider group coaching, where you're working with a small group of folks for a month, 2 months, 3 months to support them after the training, which actually sort of leads into peer learning groups. Is maybe you can create, my colleague Amanda, she always talks about accountability buddies. Get people together with groups who will help support each other to make sure they're applying what they're learning. Maybe there's even a way to incentivize it so that, the top performing group at the end of such and such period will get such and such a prize. We'll talk about that more in the reinforcing column. Resource libraries, job aids, literal forms of here's how to do everything we talked about in training. I love it when people design those up front and use them in the training, like as a tool. For example, I may be teaching Jeanette, here's how you make a widget. I'm working through the job aid about here's how to make a widget. And then afterwards I tell Jeanette, there's a resource library where that job aid is in case you ever forget. And then support hotlines, whether those are literal phone hotlines, for those of you who still use phones to talk to people, or if you use an email hotline where people, if they have questions, they can quickly get a response from somebody. And maybe you could have a group of peers be in charge of monitoring that email account on different days of the week or different weeks of the year, because you can mix and match some of these different ways of monitoring and supporting to make them more effective for your organization. But support hotlines are a great way to help address questions after the training goes on. And if you think people don't need support hotlines, like I use the example of I don't know if it's the Betty Crocker turkey hotline, but whatever, the turkey hotline on Thanksgiving Day that people can call or email, or I guess maybe now text to the bot if they don't know how to do. We've been having Thanksgiving for decades and people still don't get turkeys right. So if they need support for that, they need support for whatever it is you're trying to train people to do. And then the last column, reinforcing. This column is gold. And it's actually, in my experience, the hardest one to get organizations to buy into. As an instructional designer, as a training manager, it takes a big shift in organizational culture to say, we're going to incentivize people to do what we're training them to do. Like, we're going to incentivize them to do their jobs. And while that sounds kind of ridiculous, yeah, you got to incentivize people to do their jobs because they're not doing their jobs for free. You're not doing your job for free. Why should we expect them to do this new thing for free? Now, it doesn't have to be forever. And you can reinforce in a couple of ways. So, incentive programs where people maybe get money or time off or a gift or a chance at a gift or something that they really want. You find out what it is they want as a result of successfully applying what they learned during the program. Micro learning, where you take the hour-long training and maybe break it into shorter pieces and at timed sequences, going back to forgetting curves. One of the ways to help address forgetting curves is to have timed reinforcement, an hour later, a day later, a week later, a month later. Particularly if you want them to be able to perform something on a particular date, creating a series of micro learnings leading up to that, between the training and leading up to that date, is a great way of reinforcing what was learned in the training so people are ready come showtime. Performance reviews. I wish, if I could wave a magic wand, I wish every training requirement, meaning everything that people are taught that they need to do in a training, was somehow attached to what they're evaluated for in terms of the performance. Because the separation of those two means, as an employee, oh yeah, you told me the training is important. It's not my performance review, so it can't be all that important. So maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. If you could connect those two, people are evaluated in terms of what their job is based on applying what they learned in training. It's a game changer. And then lastly, and kind of it's low cost, are recognition events. And these could be sort of built into, if you have like a monthly all hands or quarterly all hands, like recognizing who are some of your training superstars or application of training superstars, is a better way of saying it. I'm not good at naming things. You'll find a better name, but find a way to recognize people for actually doing what you asked them to do during the training. So again, you got to monitor it, you got to reinforce it. Sorry, monitor it, you got to support it, and you got to reinforce it. And you don't have to believe me. The Kirkpatrick folks, who I love, if you've ever taken a Kirkpatrick Partners training, they are great. And they talk about how it's so important to to reinforce, monitor, and support all training if you want it to be effective. And thank you, Maya, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, it's the Butterball Turkey Hotline. If it works for them, you should do it as well. And then, thanks, Rachel, for bringing up the point about how important it is to connect trainings to organizational goals. Because yes, when you do that, it makes it easier to draw the line from here's the organizational goal, the training goal. Now it makes sense to assess your ability to do that goal in your performance review because it's directly related to some sort of organizational priority. All right, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I'll get to them, but let me talk next about training needs to be well designed. So please know, and I'll be as kind as I possibly can. I am speaking from the point of view that I graduated from, I think I completed, I've done the math, 29 different grades, so many grades. And I have experienced in those grades tremendous amounts of poor instruction and training. And as an adult who likes professional development, who likes continuous improvement, I have attended trainings that are poorly designed. And that's just like a lifelong learner going through YouTube videos. I have seen so many instructional YouTube videos that I would say, are horrible. So generally speaking, our bar is low, and we need to raise the bar in terms of what is good training. So if you have a professional that you have access to, a professional instructional designer, and a professional facilitator, professional trainer, use them. If you don't, these next few minutes are for you, because I'm going to give you a couple of tips that I think will be helpful, even if you're not a professional. Is that fair? All right. First, train adults like they're grown adults. Don't train them like they're machines. Don't train them like they're babies. And what I mean by that is it's a term called andragogy. So a lot of times when people talk about instruction, they'll use the term pedagogy. The big difference between those two terms, the literal difference, is pedagogy refers to the instruction of children, and andragogy speaks to the instruction of adults. in all my years of experience, I actually find that andragogy, if you stick with those principles, it works for adults and kids, except for maybe tiny kids. But basically, I'll say anyone from 12 years old and up, you want to at least use andragogical, if that's a correct word, ways of teaching. All right, that may be a new term to you, but let me share a little information. If you have the April Lunch and Learn handout, I'm about to go through some of that content. Let me share my screen. All right, here we go. So this is the April Break the Norm Leadership Lunch and Learn handout. For all of our Lunch and Learns, there are handouts. So if you go back to the Lunch and Learn website, you can click that little down arrow on any of the trainings that Lunch and Learns have happened in the past. You can download the handout for that training. I'm a visual learner, that's why I do that. And I also want to have you something you can put in front of your boss or procurement person and say, here's the way we should do it. I'm not crazy. Or if I'm crazy, I'm with him. So scrolling, this is the information. Oh, here are where if you answer yes to any of these questions, you might not need training. You might need something else. So are employees' roles misaligned with their interests? That might be a job fit and satisfaction issue. And then here are some things you can do instead. You may want to do job redesigns or reassess job roles or offer career development. That's in this table. Here again were my suggestions about how you can monitor, support, and reinforce training. I don't have just the quick highlight. I have like we have a description of how to do that thing afterwards. But here's what I want to get to. One moment. I'm just getting over the flu, which I don't recommend for anybody. It is trash, 0 stars, but hold on. I need to blow my nose. All right. Thank you for your patience. So here, developing better training. Andragogy, you don't need to know this, but I like saying it, was codified by Malcolm Knowles a zillion years ago. I don't have the exact date. It has 5 basic principles about how adults like to be trained. I want to go through each one of those with you. All right. Self-concept. This is the idea that adults have a sense of themselves. They're not just empty vessels for you to pour instruction into and have them spit it out when you want to. They're actual people. And what I have found in my experience of working with actual people and trying to train them is they want choice. They want to be able to choose. So give them as much choice as you can in the training. Maybe that's a choice over whether or not they go to the training. Maybe it's a choice in terms of what their learning goals are for the training. Maybe it's a choice in terms of if there are possibilities to have optional components of the training. You know, maybe everyone gets A, B, and C, and then you get to pick from D, E, and F, like who gets that part. Here's why I have found choice is so important to adults. Without choice, there's no commitment. If you don't give me a choice between A, B, and C, then if there's only an A, I'm not really choosing A. Therefore, I can be committed to it or not. But if you tell me A, B, or C, and I choose A, on some level, I'm committed to that choice because adults love to be consistent. Like once they make a choice, we love to stick with that, behave consistently with that choice, even if it's to our detriment. So use it for to your benefit. So give people a choice. Give people, learners, a choice when you can in any training. Experience. I'm going to come back to this one in a second because I'm going to share a video for that one. Readiness to learn. You essentially, the way I apply it is you want your training to be well timed. If you need people to do something in July, it may not be smart to train them in January. You know, that's 6 months. If you can get the training to be closer to when people actually have to apply the learning, they're more likely to remember it. They're more likely to retain it. You will still need some time between the training and the actual application of the training for them to practice, to test things out, for you to monitor and reinforce. But try and have your trainings be well timed. Maybe that's just-in-time training, which needs to be super short, so that if I need to create an Excel, I'm making stuff up that I have to do. I need to create an Excel spreadsheet that does something in particular. Let me quickly find a YouTube video that answers that question. That's an example of just-in-time training. in your resource library, you include some quick videos on how to do things that were interesting so people can get some just-in-time retraining. All right. So timing is key. And that's how I apply readiness to learn. Orientation to learning. Adults tend to be problem-centered. Here's an example from a real-life experience. Years ago in a former organization, I was responsible for designing a financial literacy program for college students. And so I did some research on what are the current offerings out there for financial literacy programs. They are all well, this was 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, they were remarkably the same. And you won't be surprised by this. They all started with budgets, how to make a budget, and they all ended with mutual funds. And they had the same catalog of stuff in between. And every single program talked about every single thing from A to Z. That is not what college students want. College students are problem and practical centered. They wanted to know, how do I buy a car? Can I afford to live off campus this semester? They had specific questions. And if you give them A to Z, they literally don't know where to look in that body of knowledge to find the information they want, to curate the information they want, to answer the problem that they have, the question that they have. Except I found one training that didn't do that. And it was actually a Susie Orman book. I can't remember what the title was. So basically, every chapter was a problem. You want to buy a car? Here are things you know about buying a car, or how to get yourself ready to buy a car. You want to live off campus? Here's how you make that decision in a smart way. That would be the most fantastic way to do trainings, where you ask adults, what are your problems around this topic? What do you need? And then you literally feed them back the training as, here's the problem. Here's how you can address that problem. Here's problem 2. Here's how you address that problem. Because adults love to learn that way. We don't like to have our time wasted. And then lastly, and relatedly, motivation. Adults want to know what's in it for them in this training. And that could be, how will this training help me solve the problem that's front of mind for me? Or how will I be incentivized to apply this later? But you have to find a way to make the what's in it for me really upfront and applicable. All right, I'm going to show you a quick video. So let me stop sharing. I'm going to talk as I pull things together to share. So in this video, what you're going to see is that it was taken years ago. It's dated, but it's very effective. It changed the way that I teach and changed the way that I design all my trainings. What you're going to see is students from Harvard and MIT, seniors, on graduation day. As they walk off the stage, an interviewer and a camera person ask them one simple question. Can you make a light bulb? Can you light a light bulb with these materials? And the materials are a battery, one piece of wire, and a light bulb. Spoiler alert, almost none of them could do it. As you're watching this video, the question I want to ask you to be thinking about, and then I'll answer at the end, is why? Why can't these very well educated, they will have completed the 16th grade by this point, folks from 2 amazing Ivy League schools not be able to do this simple task? All right, I will warn you, I do not have the free version of YouTube because I refuse, because I will spend all day there. So there might be a commercial that plays, but hopefully not. Change this to audio.
Graduates of Harvard and MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
We are the premier engineering and science institution in the world.
Do you think you could light a bulb with a battery and wire? Do you think you could light a bulb with a battery and wire?
Yeah. Light a bulb with a battery and a wire. Maybe. Yes.
All right.
Definitely.
Do you think you can light a bulb with a battery and a wire?
Battery and wire? Well, yes, why not?
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay, can you do that?
The interesting part about the batteries and bulbs question is that people always predict that they can do it. Students say, of course I can do this.
Any hints I should have here?
Teachers say, of course my students can do this.
Ow! Do you know why that didn't work?
I have no idea.
Battery could be dead, the bulb could be bad, I'm hooking it up totally incorrectly. I'm not an electrical engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer. But if I had to guess, I would say it's operator error.
Okay.
I know it's possible, but I don't know how to do it.
It's only after failing that you begin to get upset with the question and think, well, maybe it's a trick question, maybe this has something to do with manipulating the wires, they couldn't hold all the wires together.
You don't have a current if you only have one wire, you need to complete a closed circuit.
But that's not the case.
Oh, well, if I do it with a little light bulb, I just do this. In which case the light just lights up.
It goes to the fundamental understanding of electricity. If one cannot light a light bulb with a battery and wire, then everything built upon those basic ideas has problems.
We've always assumed that if teachers teach, students will learn.
You can't assume that what's blatantly obvious to you and has always been blatantly obvious to you is going to be that way to somebody else, especially a kid. And that's where you have to stop, regroup, and say, wait a second, is this really as self-evident as you'd like to think it is?
Sometimes the simplest problems in science defy intuition, and the most basic technology is surprisingly difficult to grasp. Is it because we weren't taught? Or is it because of something deeper?
Doesn't matter like what touches
Something about the way we think.
Most people have no.
All right, I'm not going to make you listen to commercials. I did drop the link for that video into the chat. So I'll ask you, actually, if you have a guess as to why those students couldn't make the light bulb light, even though at least one of them was an engineer, I'm curious. I'd love you to drop your answers into the chat. I'm going to tell you the answer in a second. I will do my best to be patient so that people can at least get their first thoughts out. And that is actually part of the reason. All right. This is me quietly. No, I'm not quiet. This is me convincing myself to give people a chance to respond. Oh, thanks, Allison. That Susie Orman book was the money book for the young, fabulous, and broke. It's awesome. Taught. Didn't need to know. This is good. This is good. This is good. This is good. All right. Keep putting answers in if you'd like. Here's the answer. What the researchers found is that under the pressure of a camera person and an interviewer, that these students' concept of electricity reduced from the 16th grade that they just completed and were earning the degree for, back down to like an elementary school level of their understanding of electricity. And I have seen this happen time and time again with adults, that under pressure, we revert to the original paradigm of how we learn something unless that original paradigm was ever changed. The way I think about it is, imagine a windowsill that's been painted over. You're in 5th grade and learn about electricity. Someone gives you here's how electricity works. They teach you, but you come up with your own idea. Here's how electricity works with your 5th grade mentality. 6th grade, you keep painting over, and you never revise, you never scraped away the 5th grade understanding. So you come 16th grade, you're walking off the stage at MIT, and someone says, can you do this? And what they're really asking is, do you know how electricity works? Under pressure, you go back to that original view of electricity from 5th grade. The biggest thing that I learned is that as a trainer, as an instructor, as someone who wants people to learn, I have to find out what they already know and then I either get them to tweak that themselves or I need to tweak it before I add any new stuff on top. Otherwise, I'm just painting over an incorrect paradigm or an unuseful paradigm. And they may or may not really learn what it is I taught them, because they will basically, it's like confirmation bias. They really only add in what supports this old idea that they may not even be consciously aware of. For me, it was a pretty radical idea, because it meant you may have to spend time at the beginning of my training figuring out what every single one of these people knows before I teach them stuff. And that's a huge investment of time. It's really scary. There are ways to make it a bit easy. Using some polls could be a way to get people to say, oh, I think this about the problem, or I think this. And then you can sort of like at a group level say, okay, the correct answer is A, but here's why B isn't quite right. And here's why C is not quite right. Or I've had people do that in small groups where I have them sort of tell me quickly, what do you know about this topic? Give like as a group, come with your top 5 things. And then when they share those, I can weave those into the instructions sometimes. I can say, all right, here's how things work. Now remember group A, when you said that this is how it works, that you almost got it right. The real thing that is happening here is blah, blah, blah. But spending that time and energy up front can be really scary. All right, I'm going to stop there. Oh, no, wait, there's one more thing I'm going to tell you. In terms of a format for how you can teach, if you don't have a professional or design a training, use Gagne's 9 events of instruction. I find it to be a very versatile, a very useful tool. It won't work in all situations. It won't work for everything, but it will get you most of the way there in most situations. It is literally 9 different steps you take whenever you're teaching folks. The key steps are, you got to get them to practice, and you got to give them feedback on their practice before they leave the training. All right, that said, I'm going to stop and I'm going to see if there are questions I can answer. Oh, and you can also see Rachel, and who's our CEO, and our Chief Morality Officer, Ellie. Although she's sometimes naughty, but if you're nice to her, perhaps she'll be good today. What questions are there questions I can answer? I've stunned you all into silence. What you don't know is that I'm the product of Quaker Education. Allison, you're off mute.
Can you spell Gagne for us?
Yes, Gagne with an accent. I always get this wrong. The accent over the E goes from high right to low left. I think that's an accent aigu, but my French is so bad, I'm not sure I get it right. If you just do Gagne, 9 events of instruction, you'll get there.
Ramian, there's questions in the chat. What is your favorite aha moment about learning and design?
Oh, it was when I saw that video. It was that video. It got shown to me when I was don't mean to drop the H-bomb. I was at Harvard getting my doctorate. I didn't finish. I just got the master's in ran.
You finished somewhere else.
I finished at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. But I was on like the slow 10-year plan. So that was the biggest aha for me, that I had been and I'd been a teacher up until that point and done trainings. And I was like, oh crap, I've been doing all this wrong for years. Let me fix it now. That was the biggest aha for me. That people remember what they were originally taught more than what they originally taught and remembered isn't directly impacting what they're going to learn in my experience right now. And so it's better for me to find out what that is so I can help them.
Awesome. Jennifer wants to know, what is the difference between a workshop and a training?
Oh, I use them interchangeably. I was taught that you don't use the word training in terms of talking to adults, that people train animals. You instruct adults. Picky. I think the big difference, I would say, if I had to make a distinction, is that in a workshop, people are expecting to have a hands-on experience. You're not just to be talking at them. So I think it's more of an audience expectation than anything else. But a good training will involve hands-on to the degree that you're able to. That may be speaking stuff, but it will involve some sort of practice. But no real difference.
I would like to add on too that usually workshops are like one-off things or have a very concrete amount of time, where typically trainings could be like a series that are 8 to 10 to 12 different sessions that you're working over time to make sure that you're practicing, monitoring, and doing all of those steps for that retention of learning.
Oh, good point. Ooh, I see this question about when trying to get someone to learn one specific topic or one thing or one specific topic, would it be a detriment to throw in information about other topics at the same time as well? Ooh, this is good. I'm going to say it depends, which I know is a horrible, tough answer to say, but I would say, generally speaking, I would say, don't throw in anything extra. Give them the minimum effective dose, make them focus on that, and then maybe give them the option to explore after the training other things. But here's what gives me some pause, is the forgetting curves. That research is based on the idea of adults learning meaningless information, that information that is not connected to anything they already know. And because we're trying to control for other variables. But the real, what we all know as trainers and instructional designers is if you can connect what you're teaching to what they already know or to things that they care about, it doesn't become meaningless information, it's connected information. So if you have other examples or other information that you can connect your core training content to, that the audience is interested in, that your learners care about, or that your learners already know, that's the best. Then include it. So I may say, here's a training about this training. This training is about how to make training stick. We did a lunch and learn about how to get people to comply. And some of those principles actually overlap. So I might have brought some of that information into here if I thought you had attended that session, because I'm thinking, oh, I can connect what I'm doing now to something I've done with you before. But generally speaking, I would say, less is more. Less is more. Think of it as a date, or think of it as a conversation during a date. During a date, you're not going to tell anyone your whole life story and what you want and like all of your past relationships, unless you want it to be the only date you have with them. If you're going to have a relationship with these trainers, people you are training, trainees, then parse out the information, parse out the conversation. Today, we're just going to focus on this because you still work here. And in a couple of months, because I'm so excited about the way this organization will keep you here, we can talk about X. And a couple months after that, we'll talk about Y. I don't have to dump it all on you right now, thinking that if I don't give it to you now, you'll never, ever get it because you'll never talk to me again. That kind of desperation does not work in dating or in training.
I would like to also add, one of the good ways of connecting is through storytelling. If you can relate a story that other people can relate to. I remember I was talking about communication and had a story about camping and my dad and just a communication snafu that happened. And like years later, people would come back to me and be like, remember that story about the tent? And I was like, what are they talking about? But just stories like that, because I'm naturally a storyteller when I train, are really things that people can connect to, digest, and then hold on to when they're thinking about things. Because going back to, I'm going to retain the things that I have learned in the past, or I know, those are going to be the things that kind of really touch their heart. So even if it's just work stories where I had a scenario of X, Y, and Z happening, and other people can be like, oh yeah, that's happened to me too. That's really where you can connect when it's especially applicable to the job or role that they're in.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Stories is literally you putting your brain in someone else's head in a way that they can remember it. And if you can do that with any training or workshop, you're on fire. I know we're at 1 o'clock. I'm going to answer one more question and do some closing announcements. If you can stay, that's great. If not, go back to the Break the Norm Leadership Lunch and Learn website, and we'll have the recording for this session there as well. So the last question I want to answer is this. Two. All right. Tips for conducting virtual trainings that are effective, and top 3 tips for high engagement and morale in task-based training. Ooh, that one's tougher. All right. So in terms of virtual training, use the tools of the platform, breakout groups, polls. Also, and generally speaking, my experience is that adults their brain won't stand what their butts can't stand. So try and change modes every 20 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes in a virtual training. If you can have I'm not the best storyteller. What I am good at is being personable and funny and self-deprecating. So having a good trainer do virtual stuff is also really helpful too. But those are my big tips. Just, you have to use, it's not very complicated. Change modes every 15, 20 minutes. Use the tools inside the platform. I'm a big fan of breakout groups. And you'll probably get most of the way there if you have a good or reasonable trainer. And then, where did the task one go? Because that one's a tough one. Top 3 tips for high engagement and morale in a task-based training. So I want people to be able to do a thing.
I would also like to include that Dr. Pierre is really great about answering questions after. So if you guys have questions that you think of after the training, you can email me, Rachel@breakthenormleadership.com, and he'll respond within the next week or so about what your question is.
Yeah, Rachel will make me because I need to be handled. Azutni, the person who asked that question, I need a little time for that one because I want to give you a good answer. All right, some closing announcements, and then want you guys to have an amazing afternoon. All right, if you found this, today's session again was sponsored by the Savannah PMI. Yay, PMI! Give them some love in the chat. Everyone needs PMIs. Clap your hands. If you're a member of PMI, let us know. Like raise a thumb or something. If you found this training valuable and wish to have similar sessions conducted within your organization, kindly recommend us to your leadership team. We're eager to support you and your organization's ongoing growth to ensure your stakeholders meet their objectives. When staff training aligns with stakeholder initiatives, it fosters organizational growth and success, and we want to be a part of that. Let us help you. The contact person for all of things Break the Norm Leadership is Rachel at Break the Norm Leadership. I do lunch and learns. She does the people. Also, if you like what you hear today, please leave us a Google review. Rachel, will you drop that link in the chat again? And next month's Lunch and Learn is about leading and managing change in self and others. Spoiler alert, storytelling will be involved. Because the research that I've seen shows that I used to think that feelings drove actions, that you had, in order to do something, you had to feel motivated to do it. But what I've learned is that stories drive feelings, which drive actions. So the better you are at putting stories in people's heads, even your own head, the more likely you are to get the actions that you want. But more on that next month. And lastly, I'll say, I hope we have earned the privilege of your time and attention. Have an awesome day. If you can help somebody, please do. Thank you all for being here. With that, goodbye. Feel free to sign off. And thank you for the people who were on camera and waved. It means a lot to me.